Nobody expected the most powerful moment of this game to come after the clock hit zero. Not a hit, not a throw, not even history being made on the field. It came from a few calm sentences spoken into a microphone, and the reaction hasn't slowed down since. Because when Myles Garrett opened his mouth after the game, it didn't sound like a typical post-game comment. It sounded like something else entirely, something intentional, something that made fans stop, rewind, and ask the same question over and over again. Was that just respect, or was that confirmation? Here's why people can't let it go. Garrett isn't just another player talking up a teammate. He's the voice people listen to, the one who's seen everything: losing seasons, false hope, broken promises, coaching changes, and quarterbacks who never became what they were supposed to be. When that guy chooses his words carefully, people notice. And this time, the way he said it, steady, confident, almost certain, didn't sound like optimism. It sounded like belief. The kind of belief that doesn't come from hype or headlines, but from watching something up close that others haven't fully caught yet. What's made this moment explode online isn't just what Garrett said, it's who he was talking about. A young quarterback still under debate, still dissected, still questioned by fans, analysts, and anyone who hasn't decided what box to put him in yet. And yet, in one night, in one moment, Garrett spoke about Shedeur Sanders like the outcome was never in doubt, like the moment had already been written. And that single detail is why fans are now rethinking everything they thought they knew about the direction of the Cleveland Browns. Because this didn't feel rehearsed, it didn't feel emotional in the usual way, it felt calm, certain, almost matter-of-fact, and in football, that's the scariest kind of confidence there is. Not excitement, not hope, certainty, the kind that says, I've seen this before, and I know how this ends. What happened next is why this wasn't just another win, another stat line, or another quote that gets forgotten by Monday morning. Because once you understand the pressure behind that moment, the weight behind those words, and what was quietly happening beneath the surface all game long, it starts to feel a lot less like coincidence and a lot more like a turning point. For most of the afternoon, it felt obvious what this game was going to be remembered for. All eyes were locked on Myles Garrett because every snap carried history with it. You could feel the tension building with each defensive series, the kind that hangs in the air when everyone knows something major might happen, but nobody knows when. This wasn't just another Sunday, this was one of those games where a single moment had the power to define an entire season, maybe even a career. From the opening drive, opposing blockers treated Garrett like an emergency situation, extra bodies leaning his way, chips from tight ends, running backs hesitating just long enough to get a shoulder into him before releasing. It wasn't subtle, it was survival. Every snap told the same story: do whatever it takes to slow him down. And yet, even while being swarmed, Garrett's presence warped the entire game. Plays were rushed, decisions were sped up. The pressure didn't always show up in the stat sheet, but it lived in every hurried throw, in every broken timing route. As the game dragged on, the anticipation only grew. Fans weren't just watching drives unfold, they were counting chances. Every third down felt like it could be the one. Every drop back drew a sharp inhale from the crowd. You could sense the frustration building too. Not explosive frustration, quiet, internal pressure, the kind elite players feel when they're inches away from something historic but can't quite reach it yet. And with each passing series, the clock kept moving, shrinking the window. By the time the fourth quarter hit, it felt like fate was hesitating. Double teams hadn't stopped, protection schemes stayed cautious. The opposition made it clear they would rather lose slowly than be remembered as the team that gave up that moment. For a while, it worked. Garrett fought through hands, shoulders, and bodies, bending around the edge, collapsing pockets just enough to disrupt, but history stayed just out of reach. Then it happened. One lapse, one decision that didn't arrive fast enough, one moment where help came a step too late. Garrett exploded off the line, all speed and violence, turning a one-on-one into a mistake instantly. The crowd knew before the quarterback hit the turf. The stadium erupted in that delayed roar that only happens when everyone realizes at the same time what they just witnessed. Teammates flooded in, helmets slapped, arms wrapped. A moment years in the making finally arrived. And right there, in that explosion of noise and celebration, it felt like the story had already been written. History secured, legacy stamped. The game seemed solved. Most people thought this was it, the moment that would dominate every highlight, headline, and recap. But while everyone was focused on what had already happened, the most important part of the night was still waiting to unfold. The shift didn't happen gradually. It happened in an instant, the kind of play that snaps everyone back to attention and forces both sidelines to react. Late in the game, with the tension already stretched thin, the protection finally cracked. No extra help, no safety valve, just Myles Garrett lined up across from a single blocker, reading the moment before the ball was even snapped. That brief pause before chaos, that's where elite players separate themselves. Garrett didn't hesitate. At the snap, it was pure explosion. One step, then another, bending around the edge with that unmistakable burst that makes tackles panic halfway through their set. The blocker reached, grabbed, tried to recover. It didn't matter. Garrett was already past him, closing fast, collapsing the pocket before it ever fully formed. Joe Burrow barely had time to reset his feet before the play was over. The hit came clean, the takedown was unavoidable. For a split second, everything froze. Then, the realization hit. The record, the history, the moment everyone had been waiting for finally landed. The crowd erupted, not just loud, but relieved, like something long overdue had finally been released. Teammates rushed in from every direction, not out of obligation, but genuine excitement. This wasn't routine celebration. This was joy spilling over, the kind you can't fake when you know you've just witnessed something special. But what made this play different wasn't just what it meant statistically, it was the emotional surge that followed. You could feel the entire stadium lean forward. The defense fed off it, the sideline woke up, even the opposing offense looked rattled, not shocked, but aware that something had shifted. That single snap didn't just end a drive, it tilted the energy of the game, turning a tense grind into something electric. And yet, beneath all the noise and chaos, there was an unspoken truth that hadn't fully registered yet. As massive as that moment was, it didn't decide the outcome. The celebration hadn't sealed anything. The job wasn't finished. Because while everyone was still replaying the sack in their minds, the pressure quietly moved to the other side of the ball. And that's where the night truly changed. The noise hadn't settled yet, but the reality was unavoidable. After all the celebration, all the adrenaline, the game was still hanging in the balance, and now the weight shifted squarely onto Shedeur Sanders. No cushion, no bailout, just a young quarterback walking back onto the field. Knowing that one mistake could erase everything that had just happened. This wasn't about highlights anymore. This was about nerve. For most of the season, moments like this had followed him around. Every throw dissected, every pause scrutinized, online chatter questioning if he was ready, if he was built for it, if the pressure was getting to him. None of that noise was visible on the field, but it lived in the atmosphere. You could feel it in the way the stadium held its breath. This drive wasn't just about points, it was about proving something, even if that something was only to himself. The pocket didn't suddenly become clean, the defense didn't relax. Every snap came fast, defenders closing space, bodies crowding throwing lanes. Sanders didn't rush. He didn't force it. His movements were tight, controlled, almost deliberate, like he was slowing the game down on purpose. Each completion felt earned. Each decision mattered. No panic, no visible frustration, just focus. What made the moment heavier was everything happening around it. A franchise icon had just delivered a career-defining play. The defense had given him an opening. Now it was his turn to respond. And situations like that can crush young quarterbacks. Some speed up, some shrink, some play not to lose. Sanders did none of that. He stood in it. As the drive unfolded, the energy quietly changed again. Not loud this time, confident. Teammates leaned in, the sideline watched differently. This wasn't blind hope anymore. It felt intentional, like a decision had been made to trust him with the outcome, whatever it turned out to be. And then, just when the moment was at its heaviest, when every eye was locked on him and the margin for error disappeared, the story took a turn that no one was prepared for, including the man who had just made history minutes earlier. The game could have ended there, and most people would have been satisfied. History made, pressure handled, a win secured. But what turned this from a great football moment into something people couldn't stop talking about happened after the pads came off. When Myles Garrett stood in front of reporters, fresh off one of the biggest moments of his career, nobody expected his answer to shift the conversation entirely. Yet within seconds, the focus quietly moved away from the record and straight toward the quarterback. When Garrett was asked about the final drive, his tone wasn't animated, it wasn't dramatic, it was calm, confident, almost casual, and that's exactly why it hit so hard. He didn't frame it as hope, he didn't hedge it, he spoke like someone who already knew how it would end. He said that once they reached field goal range, he knew it was over. No hesitation, no doubt, just certainty. That single word changed everything. Because coming from Garrett, certainty carries weight. This is a player who doesn't hand out praise lightly, a leader who's watched seasons fall apart, who's seen talented quarterbacks struggle under pressure, who understands better than anyone how fragile momentum can be. And yet, talking about Shedeur Sanders, Garrett didn't sound surprised. He sounded assured, like the outcome was expected, like the moment belonged to Sanders before it even happened. Fans picked up on it immediately. Clips started circulating, comment sections filled with the same observation. That didn't sound like encouragement, it sounded like belief. Not belief in potential, but belief in execution. And that distinction matters, because encouragement says, I hope you can do it. Belief says, I know you will. Then came the line that sealed it. Garrett said he was proud of him. Simple, direct, no exaggeration. Coming from the most respected voice in the locker room, that word landed heavier than any stat ever could. Proud doesn't get said casually in professional sports. It's reserved for moments where someone earns trust, not just yards. That's why fans didn't hear a compliment, they heard validation. And while no one officially declared anything, the reaction made one thing clear. When a franchise cornerstone speaks that way about a young quarterback, people listen. Because moments like that don't happen by accident. And once those words were out there, the entire night started to look different. What made the night even heavier wasn't just what was said about Shedeur Sanders, it was what he chose to reveal himself. When he finally spoke after the game, there was no chest pounding, no victory speech, no attempt to sound unshaken. Instead, his words carried a quiet honesty that caught people off guard. He admitted the week hadn't been normal, that something deeper had been weighing on him. Not physically, not schematically, mentally, spiritually. He didn't dress it up, he didn't explain away the rough moments, he acknowledged them. He talked about battles he'd been fighting internally, the kind you don't see on film and can't fix with a better play call. He mentioned his body language felt off, that his energy felt different. And in doing so, he gave people a rare glimpse behind the helmet. This wasn't a quarterback struggling with reads or timing. This was a young player carrying something heavier than football. It's been said that pressure in this league doesn't always show up as panic. Sometimes it looks like silence. Sometimes it looks like restraint. And listening to Sanders, it became clear he'd been fighting more than just external expectations. There's been constant speculation surrounding him all season, debates about readiness, projections, opinions flying from every direction. Add that to the grind of a long year, and it's not hard to understand how doubt can creep in if you don't guard against it. What stood out most was the way he framed it. He didn't blame anyone, he didn't point fingers. He talked about learning to recognize those moments when your mindset starts slipping, when negativity tries to take hold quietly, when confidence feels just slightly out of reach. And he admitted that this season had taken him through all of it, highs, lows, and everything in between. That level of openness isn't common at this stage, especially from someone still trying to establish themselves. But instead of weakening the moment, it deepened it, because suddenly the calm we saw on that final drive looked different.
It wasn't natural ease, it was something earned, something pushed through. And what made that possible wasn't something he found alone, it came from the people around him. The turning point didn't come from a play call or an adjustment on the whiteboard. It came behind closed doors, away from the cameras, in the quiet space where teams either splinter or come together. When halftime arrived, Shedeur Sanders didn't disappear into his own thoughts. His teammates didn't let him. That's where everything changed. Instead of letting the weight of the moment sit on his shoulders, guys pulled him in. Not all at once, not with speeches, just real conversations, honest words, the kind that cut through noise and doubt. They reminded him who he was, they told him what they were seeing, and most importantly, they didn't let him stay stuck in his own head. That's not automatic in locker rooms, that's culture, and it only shows up when there's trust. This wasn't about fake positivity or empty reassurance. It was direct, grounded, a simple message echoed from multiple voices. This isn't you, and you know it. Reset, breathe, let it go. Those are the
Moments players remember years later, not because they're loud, but because they're real. When a team refuses to let its quarterback drift, it says everything about how connected that group really is. When Sanders came out after halftime, the difference was subtle but undeniable. His movements looked cleaner, his decisions came quicker, the hesitation was gone. The pressure didn't disappear, it just stopped owning the moment. The offense started finding rhythm again, not because everything suddenly worked, but because the belief returned. That belief spread quickly. One completion fed the next. One calm decision reset the tempo. That's what winning mentally looks like. Not dominance, not perfection, stability, control. And it was built in that locker room, in those few minutes where teammates stepped up and refused to let the night slip away. By the time the fourth quarter arrived, it wasn't just about execution anymore. Something else was in place, something you can't diagram. And once that clicks, the game starts to tilt in ways numbers can't explain. By the time the final moments settled, it became clear why this night didn't feel like just another win tucked into a losing season. Fans weren't talking about the score. They weren't replaying the box stats. What lingered was a feeling, the kind that usually only shows up in hindsight. And almost immediately, people started connecting dots, not declaring anything official, not crowning anyone yet, but quietly asking the same question: was that the moment everything aligned? From a distance, it's easy to treat these things as coincidence. A veteran star making history, a young quarterback delivering late, a positive post-game quote. But fans know better than anyone that franchises aren't shaped by single plays, they're shaped by trust. And that's what made this feel different. The way Garrett spoke didn't sound like someone hoping the future works out. It sounded like someone who had already made up his mind about who he trusts in the biggest moments. That's why so many people viewed his words as more than praise. For years, Garrett has been the constant through chaos, coaching changes, roster overhauls, quarterback uncertainty. Through it all, he remained the standard. So when a player like that speaks with confidence about Shedeur Sanders, fans naturally listen. Not because it guarantees success, but because it suggests internal belief has already taken root. Online, the reactions poured in, some cautious, some optimistic, some emotional, many pointing out the same detail. Garrett didn't speak like someone trying to motivate a young teammate. He spoke like someone validating what he'd already seen. And that distinction carries weight. It suggests the connection wasn't built on hope or hype, but on shared moments under pressure when outcomes actually mattered. This is how turning points look in real time. Quiet, unofficial, easy to dismiss if you're not paying attention. But the fans paying attention know these moments don't always announce themselves clearly. Sometimes they show up as a look, a tone, a simple sentence said at the right time by the right person. And that's why so many believe this game will be referenced years from now, not for what it decided that day, but for what it started to shape moving forward. When people look back on this game, it probably won't be remembered for the record alone. Records get broken, highlights get replayed, and seasons blur together over time. What lasts are the moments that reveal something deeper, moments that tell you who a team believes in when everything is on the line. And this was one of those moments. What happened on that field felt like more than coincidence. An established leader delivered when his team needed it, then spoke with a level of confidence that turned heads. A young quarterback faced pressure that had broken others before him, stayed steady, and finished the job. And in between those two moments sat something rare in this league: trust. Not built through speeches or promises, but through shared pressure and real-time decisions. No one officially handed over anything. No declarations were made. But sometimes franchises don't change through announcements, they change through acknowledgement. When Myles Garrett spoke the way he did about Shedeur Sanders, it signaled something fans have been waiting years to feel: stability, direction, belief coming from the inside out. Whether this moment becomes a turning point or simply a chapter depends on what happens next. Development, growth, consistency, none of that is guaranteed. But nights like this matter because they show what's possible when pressure doesn't fracture a team, it sharpens it. When leaders trust emerging voices, when adversity doesn't expose cracks but strengthens bonds. And maybe that's why this game feels different in hindsight. Not because it solved everything, but because for the first time in a long time, the future didn't feel like a question mark. It felt like something taking shape, quietly, deliberately, one moment of belief at a time.